Hello and welcome back to the Aussie Role Call podcast, your place for all things Australian TTRPG. Once again, we've got an interview for you. We've got some news about upcoming events, and we'll be back again in 2 weeks, all brought to you by the Australian roleplay community. I'm Kate. You'll hear from me, Dan, and Stevie, and we're all involved in different parts of the Aussie TTRPG space. And we've got yet another interview for you that Stevie's going to tell you all about.
Thank you so much, Kate. It is wonderful to be back. Our next guest is Logan Timmins. Logan is a veritable powerhouse in the local TTRPG scene. He is a game designer, game design consultant, and one of the mentors for the ARC Mentor program. We were so thrilled to be able to catch up with Logan and share what he does with you all. So, without further ado, let's dive into the interview. Logan, welcome to the Aussie Role Call podcast. First of all, why don't you tell us and our fabulous listeners who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Stevie and Kate. Very cool to be here. Yes, I'm Logan. I use he, him pronouns. I'm living on Wurundjeri country at the moment in Bulleen, which is named after the Bolin Billabong, which is a culturally significant place of eel harvest and gathering historically. Very cool place. Come down and check it out. But aside from that strange location advertisement, I write tabletop role-playing games of connection and self-reflection is the niche that I've landed myself in. A lot of personal and intimate games. One of them won an award one time. That was Logan, an autobiographical tabletop game, which is probably my proudest work. But I've done lots of various things since then and before then. I think I started in 2019 and now it's 2024. So it's been 5 years. Yay, maths.
5 years. Wow. So talk us through a little bit about how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, it's a funny old story. I mean, the most interesting starting place is on Tumblr, as many interesting things start. And I saw a gift set of Critical Role, their first campaign, and it was, the 7-8 of them sitting at a table, talking, no sound because it's GIFs. And someone was in the comment being like, OMG, this moment was so intense. Like, I couldn't look away, blah, blah. I'm like, there are people sitting at a table. What are you talking about? I don't get it. And so I was like, I guess I'll check this thing out. I guess I had time on my hands. And yeah, felt head over heels in love with tabletop role-playing game from there. I was really hooked on that campaign, watched it, binged it to catch up, and then watched I think I managed to get to the last 4 or 5 episodes live, which was a big deal for me. And from there, I started playing Dungeons & Dragons and met some really awesome people, and then got on to Twitter, which was another milestone, and learned about indie role-playing games. And I was like, wait, there's more? Oh, my God. And found Itch. I think that was – I came on Twitter at about the time when like the Sad Mech Jam was happening and lyric games were becoming a thing, and a lot of big game jams were producing really interesting games that people were really excited about. So I kind of got swept up in that gust of indie energy, which was really cool. And my brain exploded as soon as I went on Itch and saw there were like tens of thousands of other role-playing games. My brain exploded. And then it kind of landed like that humans make tabletop role-playing games and that I'm a human, so therefore I could make a role-playing game. And so after playing D&D and running D&D, I bought and read a lot of indie games, but I don't know that I actually played any before I started writing my first one. Wrote my first one for a game jam, and it was fine. It was okay. The first piece of art that any artist makes is always easy for that artist to criticize. But it's been a really great journey since then, having actually played a lot of indie games and not a lot of D&D since, to really see my journey and sort of the journey of the indie scene as well.
I love it. And I love how a lot of people are probably going to see themselves in that journey too. You find like an entry point, you get really invested in it, and then you discover that there's actually a bigger, broader world out there. You mentioned like finding the indie scene. What was it that drew you to that and drew you specifically to create games of connection and reflection?
Good question. So I think I happened to, be on Twitter following D&D people, and some of them were also, indie people. And so it was just a matter of slowly following more people and widening the circle. And then once I found Itch, I was just like, oh my God, I need to dive into this wonderland. And so I did that, just clicking around familiar faces and then unfamiliar faces. And I think what kind of another exploded my brain point in time was when I learned about solo role-playing games. The one that sticks out in my mind, I'll name two here. One is Perescence by Kilobaters, which is my favorite role-playing game ever. One page, very simple, could be called a lyric game, but they're very impactful in a very short period of time. And then another is We Forest 3 by Ray Nedjadi, which is a bit of a longer game, also gorgeous layout by Maria Misson. And that exploded my brain because I hadn't considered solo role-playing games to be a thing. And the pacing felt very different to, say, Dungeons & Dragons, which I had been playing up till that point. And this idea of like a slower pacing and a very different journey of sort of diving into myth and lore, and the player having a more active creative voice in the story was like, oh, wow, that's really different. And so I wanted to explore that more. I'm typically... Yeah, I enjoy fantasy and was excited to see games that decentered violence. And so I wanted to move more and explore more in that space. But it took me some years to like land on the pithy catchphrase of connection and self-reflection. Just kind of followed more and more what I enjoyed, and that's where I landed.
Wonderful. And thank you for taking us on that particular journey. You dropped a term that I don't think a lot of people are going to be necessarily familiar with, and that is the idea of a lyric game. Now, I know that you do this on your podcast, but would you mind defining for us what a lyric game is, or what you think makes a lyric game?
Sure, can do. Yes, lyric game, it's a niche within the role-playing game sphere. The thing about lyric games is there is no one definition. Hence, I had a podcast to try and just explore all the bounds and edges of what a lyric game might be. But I guess to give a more satisfying answer, a lyric game to me, or things I often see lyric games do that I quite enjoy, are they're often quite short games, less than 30 pages, often even less than 10. They're often very intimate or personal. They talk about a very, very specific experience that you're guided through or invited to go on. And they often also blur the line between reality and play. So you might be asked to play as yourself, or go outside and play in the real world, or recall real past experiences and bring them into the game. And so a lot of the lyric games that I really enjoy, you're playing in some sense, you might be playing in a fictional sense, but there's often a real connection to self that can happen, and a sort of self-exploration that I think is really cool.
Wonderful. And I think that is a great distillation of like many different ideas coming together, and a great explanation for those who might not be familiar with the concept. You also do a lot of other things. You're not just a tabletop creator. You are also one of the mentors for the ARC TTRPG mentorship program. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what that is and what your role is in that?
Totally, yeah. So the ARC TTRPG mentoring program is in its third year this year, which is exciting. And I am one of the mentors. We've been able this year to expand to 2 mentors, where previously I was the sole mentor. And it's through ARC, and the idea is to take mentees through the ideation of their first tabletop role-playing game through to creation. And we have been able to encourage mentees to then show that game at PAX as a kind of a keystone achievement moment. So yeah, that's the crux of the program, and it's been really cool to see different mentees come through and make totally different games, and just really add to the new and diverse voices in the Australian role-playing scene.
And what has been your favorite sort of like memory, or maybe like game ideas that have come out of being a mentor? Like, what has surprised you?
Some of my favorite memories are around the mentees like demoing their game for the first time, or playtesting it or showing it to other people. And I, as part of the mentoring, I'm often one of those first few playtesters. And it's really cool to see their expression, realizing and just, reiterating to them that this thing didn't used to exist. Like, this was maybe a couple sentences in your head, and now it's a thing that we've all just played and had a really great time doing together. And, obviously I enjoy playing tabletop role-playing games, but to the added joy on top of that of sort of witnessing this person make something real. And there's often at the start, there's a lot of like self-doubt, or like, can I even do this? Is this even a good idea? And carrying that through to like seeing them claim themselves as a game designer, and then, demoing the game, showing up at PAX, and the energy and excitement that folks often get coming out of that. That's really exciting.
That does sound like a real high, and I absolutely true. That sounds like an amazing process to be either in a mentor or a mentee in. You are an award-winning game designer with Logan, an autobiographical role-playing game. Now, I remember distinctly the launch phase of that. You had like quite a big launch around it. You had lots of stuff going. I remember there being quite a lot of hype around it. A personal story that came out of that was I several times went to your itch page to buy this. Now, this is before I came out and before I started transitioning. And I went to your itch page several times and I hovered over the buy button. And I'm like, I don't think I'm ready to open that door yet. And that realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, okay, there is something here that's a bit deeper that I probably need to unpack. So it still is a game that I haven't yet played, but it is a key moment for me in my own story. So, I think that game has had a massive impact on me, even though I have never played it. But I want you to talk us through what is Logan about, and it has obviously a lot of acclaim, and what the reception for you has been like.
Sure. Yeah. Firstly, thanks for sharing that story, Stevie. That's very touching and humbling. But yes, so Logan is an autobiographical tabletop game. So in it, you play as me. You'll play as me from birth to age 22 or 23, I think. That's how old I was when I decided to stop working on the draft and finally kick it out the door. Gently nudge it out the door and into the sky. So yeah, you play through as me. It uses sort of Powered by the Apocalypse 2d6 plus stat mechanics plus a mix of firebrands, which just means you choose specific scenes in my life to play through rather than the minutiae of me waking up every morning and going to the toilet and having breakfast for 23 years. That would get quite boring, I think. And so what I distilled into that game was key moments in my life, key scenes that I wanted to share with the player. And they run the gamut from things like realizing that I'm trans, that I'm queer, having younger siblings being born into my life, or things like mum putting on her favorite CD, and is she going to put on the cool pink CD, or do we have to listen to all the hymns that her new husband likes? So it runs the gamut of the mundane and the sort of more dramatic, I guess. But they're all really important memories or key memories to me. So the invitation of Logan is to play through my life. There is a particular emotional arc that's designed in, and a lot of it is up to the players of what they would choose to experience. Depending on what they choose, my parents may or may not get divorced, for example. But no matter what they do, there's 4 things that always happen to your Logan. He'll always be an older brother. He'll always be trans. He'll always come to love his body, and he'll always have a great beard. One of these is not like the others. Yeah, so that's the general way that the game runs, and I hadn't seen anything quite like it before. I wasn't sure if anyone would even like it. Like, is it even a thing that anyone else besides me would find interesting, let alone play it? And so I did do a lot of playtesting beforehand. It is a solo game, so it was just like me sitting in a video chat with another trusted friend and designer while they play, and I'm taking notes. And yeah, the playtesters were really generous with their time and feedback, and it was interesting to hear from a lot of players. I also played with Jeff on the Party of One podcast, so you can listen in on that if you want a taste. But it was really interesting to hear from a lot of players that they were able to find some portion of themselves in their Logan that they created. And even though they're being very explicitly not themselves, they're still able to reflect on or reveal or uncover a part of themselves, which I think is super fascinating. And it brings up this phrase that I've heard, and I don't know where it originally comes from, sadly, but this idea that the most personal is the most universal, and the idea that the more specific you're being about an experience or an invitation in a game, the more it will actually deeply touch people. So it's been really lovely that has been the impact, and people have been really nice about it, saying nice things. And I actually learned today there's what's it called? The Analog Game Convention. It's like an online convention. Someone, completely unbeknownst to me, is an independent academic and is doing a essay or a talk or something on, like, I think something about trans bodies and like coming home to your body as a trans person and creating identity using Autobio and one of my other games as case studies. And yeah. Yeah. So people seem to like it.
Yeah,
which is great.
Well, it's sort of the way you've just talked about it. Really, I think emphasizes what you were saying earlier about how you create games that are about connection and reflection, because you're really inviting people to connect with your history and your life on a specific level. But as you said, it also gets them to reflect on themselves, and I think that that sounds like it is very much an epitome of your work as a whole. So, to a more, I guess, general question, maybe not general question, more specific question. What is your favorite gaming-related memory?
Oh, that's an easy one. So I was in a Wonder Home campaign with my partner and her son I think we played Wonder Home like almost every week for like a year. We all, really love that game. It's a gorgeous game by Jay Dragon of Possum Creek Games, with additional writing from various other folks. And really lovely game about journeys and finding home, and really encourage people to check it out. But there was a particular session that we did where our three characters went to a new location. They had a particular tradition where they had this annual feast. I think it was on a solstice or some such, but the tradition in that place was that you don't serve yourself. You pile up a plate for someone that you're sitting next to, and you gift them the food that you think that they would enjoy.
Yeah.
So we're talking, at a meta level, like, okay, so your character should do for yours, and then you do yours, and then we get this NPC to do yours, and kind of had a little bit of that. And I wasn't sure who was going to get the food for my character. And then my partner's son, or my stepson, he said, no, I've got it. He's got an idea. And he beautifully narrated how, so my character is a caretaker and takes care of these small and forgotten gods. And he narrated how these tiny gods stacked up a plate for me and brought it over. And it was, I don't know, it's just a really beautiful moment. That he decided to do that and was really thoughtful. He's a very thoughtful young man. Thoughtfully, put a lot of thought into what my character might like, and describing how my these small gods that my character had cared for are sort of giving that care back. It was just really sweet and really beautiful, and I'm pretty sure I teared up at the time as he was describing it. But that's my favorite tabletop memory.
That is just too cute.
Super cute.
Oh my goodness. That brings me to my next question, which is, what are your future plans? So what is coming out in the near future? I mean, I know we've sort of mentioned your podcast in passing.
Sure. So yes, next on my horizon. So the Lyrical Ludology podcast season 1 has ended, which I'm very, very pleased with, very happy with how that all shaped up. I am planning one more episode, which will be a lyric game in and of itself, and running a game jam for lyric games as a kind of celebration of finishing the season. What else? PAX is this year. I'm going to be at PAX running a work in progress game about knights, and the idea that it's very much an allegory for growing up in a strict Christian upbringing, and that overlaying that onto knights having a very strict oath from a monarchy, and then when they go into the real world and go on their quests, it's actually quite a lot different than their monarch has perhaps led them to believe, and then they get to choose for themselves actually what kind of knight they want to be. Currently, it's called A Knight's Oath. That may change by the time we get to PAX or the quick start comes out. And the other thing I'm doing is I also, of course, started designing another different game based on the book The Raven Tower by Anne Leckie. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. There's 2 MCs. One of them is a trans man, so hell yeah. But Anne Leckie's a really great writer, and she writes about cultures and religion and politics really interestingly. So the particular way she writes about gods in that book has inspired me to write about being a god. But they're not omnipotent or all powerful. They have to be really careful about how they use their power. So yes, that's bubbling in the background too.
Bubbling in the background. I love it. All right. Kate, did you have any questions for Logan?
I don't, because I've been just sitting here listening and being like, God damn it, people are talented, rude. I think all of the questions I had was going to ask have then subsequently, during the answer to the question, been answered, unfortunately for me. So now I sit here like a person at the end of a job interview going, no, I have no questions, thank you very much. Which feels...
I've been that person.
Yeah. It's interesting. What, if any, advice would you give to someone who wants to break into writing their own TTRPGs? Because it is something I think a lot of people go, I don't, how do people do this? I don't even know where to start. I know obviously you don't want to give away all of your mentoring tricks. Is there any like quick, I don't want to say the deep dulcet tones of advice, but that moment of what's the thing that you would be like, hey, think about this, to someone who wants to write their own?
Yeah, I'd happily give away all my mentoring advice if I had time and didn't need money.
Yes, that's.
And I think the thing that that I often like to give for a small piece of advice is to start small. I know Dungeons and Dragons was my start, and that's like a massive 300-page book, and I still have not written anything nearly that large, and I don't know that I ever will, because that's a lot and mildly overwhelming. So I often advise, or I would highly recommend, starting with like a one-page game. There are a lot of really great one-page games out there. You can search one-page or less than 5-page games on itch. There's a tagging system for that. Pick something that seems interesting and like reskin it to emulate your favorite movie or video game or book, and just do one small thing and get it done. And often the first step is the hardest. So if you make that first step small, it can make the following steps a lot easier. That's my advice.
I think it's good advice. I think it kind of comes back to what one of our other interviewees has said, which was you can only get started by starting. That idea of just start something, and if it's starting small, that's a good way to go.
And I also love the idea of reskinning something, because that'll give you like a feel for flow and layout and mechanics and stuff without having to start from square one. So I think that's really helpful, like a really nice gentle on-ramp into designing your own TTRPG.
Yeah, like for I mentioned earlier, We Forest 3 by Ray Najati, which is a game that I really loved. That again blew my brain into solo role playing games, and I shamelessly hacked that into Sapling Soul. I really loved the story that We Forest 3 embarked on, and it has roots in Filipino folklore, because Ray's from the Philippines. I'm not from the Philippines, and so sort of reskinning it into my own experience of forests and nature felt like something that I could do and that I was really excited to do, because I really loved that game and I really love nature. So I copied the layout. I copied the structure. What I changed, of course, was all of the prompts and the names of the stats, but the mechanics and sort of the progression was all the same, as a hack is often to do. So I guess to add on to the advice, find a game. It can be easy to find a game that you really love. If there's one-page game that you have played and really enjoyed, that can be a great place to start hacking as well.
Awesome. I love it.
I think there are a lot of people who I know. So for your context, Logan, I'm a player, not a maker when it comes to TTRPGs. Yet. I'll go with, given I don't really DM very often, I'm probably a little further off than the average person. But I think there's something to be said for people who just have a crack. Like it's and to find, I think a lot of people think you have to start from this brand new place, where I think the advice of start with something you do love, and it doesn't have to be D&D or Pathfinder or these systems that are, I'll say, immense, I think is a good way to look at it. And I think it probably leads into actually one of the Fast 5 questions when we get there.
Yeah, I just had another thought, which was, how people will often say, I want to write a book. But writing a book is a big thing. It's a massive thing to do, and it'll take you forever. If you start with something small, you write a zine, or you write a one-page TTRPG, that is a much more accomplishable goal. And, you're not going to be, stuck for years going, oh, I'm still working on that role-playing game, or I'm still working on that book. It's starting small is a great way to just get started. Yeah.
And it's a great way to receive feedback and to learn more about yourself as a designer quickly. The more smaller games you do, you'll, each time you design a new game, you'll have learnt from the previous game, from any feedback that you may have received from any playtesting that you're able to do, or any players out there. And in the meantime, I recommend, playing and reading more games. And so between game number 1 that you make and game number 2 that you make, you've acquired more knowledge and understanding and experience and opinions and likes and dislikes about various mechanics and what you enjoy, and then you can bring that into game 2. And speaking from experience, I the first game that I tried to design was this, it was going to be this big thing, 300 pages, character playbooks, all the things. It was going to do all the genres, and it was a bit of a game that tried to be everything. And a game that tries to be everything is nothing, in my opinion. It's better to do one thing really well and really impactfully than try to do everything and it all just kind of be, very watered down tea, which some people like watered down tea, but I digress. So yeah, doing small games often has really helped me in my journey. And again, it took me years to kind of find, it took me years to get to the place where I could make auto buy. If I tried to make that game at the start, it probably wouldn't be very good. And it would be very different. It would look very differently. And I didn't know at that starting date what games could do, what they were, in air quotes, allowed to do. I didn't even really understand what the barriers were for me to push against. I assumed, all games have 6 stats, and they all include combat because I came from Dungeons and Dragons. But as I'm reading more and playing more, and watching more actual plays are a great way to expose yourself to different games as well. I get a firmer sense of where the boundaries are to consciously push past them if I want to.
Yeah, it's that classic kind of have to learn some of the rules in order to know what to break.
Yeah, know the rules before you break them.
Makes the breaking all the more fun.
Oh yeah.
Because then you're intentionally doing it.
Yeah, you're breaking by choice, not by accident.
Yeah, which then makes it a very interesting design decision. And yeah, thinking as a designer, each decision that you make has impacts not only for the game that you're creating and the story that it tells, but also for, I guess, your own personal design journey and like how you want to be known in the design space. Because the games that you continue to make will, people will get a sense of the common factors, and people will, even not necessarily consciously, but if they see your game, they'll be like, oh, it's going to sort of be like this. And so if you're consciously making those decisions, you can shape that kind of image more purposefully.
Personal branding. It's what all of us online are encouraged to do these days.
2024.
That's true. It's true.
Amazing. Alrighty. Well, we might jump into our fast 5 questions. So, Logan, if you are ready, what do you think is the best gaming table snack?
Maybe this is boring, but plain chips. They're a crowd pleaser. You just chuck them in your mouth and they're gone.
All right. Favorite dice? It can either be dice set or die size.
D8 is just a very aesthetically pleasing shape, and I did use D8s in that earlier big everything game that I mentioned, and I haven't used them since.
Oh, there you go. You've learnt something about yourself. What is your favorite game to introduce new players to?
Oh, I think at the moment it's Village Song by the Story Brewers, because it's gorgeous in very many senses of the word. I've got a copy here on my shelf. And it's very easy. There you go. It's very easy to get into. There's no dice. There's no complicated character sheets. It's very smooth to get folks into. I have introduced folks to role-playing games through Village Song. Yeah, it's just a very well-designed game and super replayable. I've played it like 10 plus times, and each time has been super different to the last. Highly recommend.
Fabulous. And tabletop must-have. What must you have at a tabletop?
Safety and water. Just talk to each other. Have some safety tools ready to go. Cushions, blankets if it's cold, water.
That's sort of like the bottom of Maslow's pyramid,
Yeah.
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 Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's do it.
Then good tabletop experience is the next one after that.
Amazing. And now, if you could have any companion or minion or animal or robot, what would it be?
Griffin. I'm a Griffin guy. I love a good hybrid creature. It's very big trans energy, but also I just want to ride. I just want to fly around on a Griffin. I think that would be really fun.
That sounds absolutely amazing and stellar. Well, Logan, thank you so much for being a guest. Now, where can people find more about you and where you are on the internet?
Yes, where can they do that? You can find me on, I have an itch page, breathingstories.itch.io. I also have a card, logantimmins.card.co, and that's card with 2 R's. And from there, you can find a lot of other things, including the podcast that's come up and various other social medias. I'm quite intermittent on social media at the moment, as Twitter was my main place and then it exploded. So still kind of resettling the dust there.
Twitter, the only website we're allowed to dead name.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Logan, for being a guest. You've been an absolute delight. And we'll possibly be talking to you again at some point in the future, depending on what you're up to and where you are. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Aussie Roll Call News Roundup, a curated selection of news from the Australian TTRPG scene. First up, we have some events that are coming up. So firstly, there is both Oz Comicon Brisbane and Oz Comicon Sydney coming soon in September. Oz Comicon Brisbane will be happening at the Brisbane Convention and Exhibition Centre on the 14th and the 15th of September. And Oz Comicon Sydney is happening the following weekend on September 21st and 22nd at the Sydney Showground. Oz Comicon is not only about comics, there are cosplays, there are artists, panels, and they do indeed feature tabletop gaming, including TTRPGs. So if you want to find out more about Oz Comicon, head to ozcomicon.com, that's OZCOMICCON.com, and of course that link will also be in the show notes. And as a reminder, for ARC coming up as part of Melbourne International Games Week, we will have a live stream featuring actual plays, panels, and so much more on Sunday the 6th of October. That is also the start of Daylight Savings Time as well. That live stream will be happening over on the ARC Twitch channel, and the various videos from that live stream will then be subsequently available on the ARC YouTube channel at a later date. Also, as part of Melbourne International Games Week, ARC will be hosting PAX at the Table. This will be taking place as part of PAX Australia, which is happening here in Melbourne from the 11th of October to the 13th of October. PAX at the Table is a large collection or selection of tabletop role-playing games that you can play. There are indeed, as I record this, 44 games on the ticket, so there is going to be so much to choose from, and most of those are independent games. I'm having a look at the list of games now, and the sheer volume and immensity of it is completely mind-blowing. There are various different versions of Fragged running across the 3 days at PAX. There are other locally produced games such as Make Our Own Heaven, Dark Vigil, Parslings, The King's Poisoner, Relics, and so many more, as well as slightly more popular games that you may have heard of already, such as Vampire the Masquerade, Mothership, Thirsty Sword Lesbians, Crash Pandas, Honey Heist, Call of Cthulhu, not to mention, of course, Dungeons and Dragons. That is just a very small teaser of what ARC is offering at PAX at the Table. Like I said, PAX Australia is running at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre from the 11th of October to the 13th of October. All of the links to those events will be in the show notes, and that is all I have for you in this episode's news, and I will see you in the next one. This podcast is produced in affiliation with the Australian roleplay community. Your hosts have been Kate O'Sullivan, Dan Machuca, and Stevie Schaefer. Cover art by Helen Graham of Dewey Studios. Title music is Sweet Sunday Groove by Slailkey. Production by Stevie Schaefer.